All right, everybody, welcome. It's Bill Patton with 720 Degree Coaching. And just so you know, 720 degrees comes from the concept of two circles, two complete things that intersected for a moment there. So Sean.Drake and I are going to come together for a moment. We're going to collaborate. Hopefully this spirit of collaboration becomes something that becomes really infectious. But Sean comes from RacquetFit, and there's good news and there's bad news, and sometimes the bad news is the good news, and he's going to explain that. And you can see he's getting kind of that quizzical look on his face like he doesn't know what I'm talking about, but that's all right, because we're going to get into Sean's business, and we're going to talk about a lot about how can you gain an advantage as a tennis pro by collaborating with the best medical people and creating the best team around you to better serve your clientele. So, Sean, how are you doing today?
I'm great, buddy. It's good to be on with you.
All right. No, it's been fun to get to know you a little bit more in the last couple of weeks. It was good to see you in Irvine. Tell us a little bit about the origins of RacquetFit and how did you get involved with that?
Yeah, so I think the big part is John Embry from the USPTA reached out to Dr. Greg Rose at TPI. This is a few years ago, and basically what we've done in TPI and golf, he's like, I want to recreate that opportunity for tennis pros and medical and fitness in the tennis world. How can we do that? And so Greg got a hold of me, and he's like, hey, we're going to go into this multi-sport performance program, and we're going to build out tennis and baseball and a couple other different issues and for different sports. And I said, great, let's do it. And so about 3 years ago, we got together and we started figuring out who our team was going to be, picking our advisory board members, starting to look at the serve, ground strokes, volleys, looking at the game, the technical portion. And then through that 3-year process of research, R&D, and getting the best minds around, we came up with our product at RacquetFit.
Okay, awesome. Now, the skeptical mind, might say, well, Sean's not really a tennis player. His background's not in tennis. So how can he teach me? Because, I am the tennis pro and I'm the expert on all things. What is it about the expertise of RacquetFit that helps people realize maybe they don't know everything they need to know?
That's a good question. Number one, our pros that teach for us are two of the best in the sport. So Dr. Mark Kovacs and Jeff Salzenstein. So as a tennis pro, when you come to one of our seminars, you're being taught by them as well as Dr. Rose and myself. So if you look at, I'm not a great tennis player overall, but that's not my specialty, right? My specialty is the biomechanics, sports medicine, sports performance world. And this is where our philosophy in RacquetFit comes into play, because that would be like a medical person in my field saying, hey, I don't need to go to a continuing education seminar with the top, sports chiro or sports physio talking about the best ways to look at rotational athletes. And just due to me not wanting to go there because I'm not the one teaching would be the opposite of what you're trying to affect with improving performance. So that being said, I'm finishing my USPTA pro right now. I've been working, diligently with, a lot of top pros in Southern California, as well as the rest of the country. But when you look at our product, like going back to the advisory board, the people that created RacquetFit, a lot of our systems and how we look at the athlete, it's the best names in the industry. And so, you're really getting the best minds around the human body. And I think that's what we'll get to later on in this conversation, is that, for the tennis pro that's looking at this saying, hey, it's just another continuing education seminar, it's another divisional conference, it's another world conference. It's actually not. It's very interactive. It's very educational. And then more importantly, we give you tangible tasks to take back to your country club and to your athletes when you get home.
Okay, awesome. Now, referencing Jeff Salzenstein is interesting because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe he was the oldest person to break into the top 100. And part of his story was sort of a rededication to his physical plant, that nutrition and fitness and all that was a part of that. So do you have some more background for us on his story?
Yeah, well, I think Jeff tells the story better than anybody else. I don't like telling somebody else's story. But what I will say is that I think the reason that he got to where he was at, because he started looking at these principles that we look at RacquetFit and TPI and on base, where the body's a major component to performance. And a lot of times that's misunderstood and not looked at. And we go into our technical, tactical, or we look at the mental, or we look at the equipment, but we forget about this piece called the body. And so for Jeff, I know that he's worked diligently, especially with what he's doing, looking at mobility, looking at stability, looking at strength. And so if you go back into his story about, his ankle injuries and his surgeries there, and just the different things that he had to overcome to get to where he was at, made him a perfect candidate to get involved with us, because he understands, okay, if you try to coach a body that can't do what you're asking it to do, bad things are going to happen. And so this is how we create our opportunities for our athletes to have a better, 1, more fun playing the game, 2, longevity in the game, and 3, hopefully no injuries.
Awesome. No, and one of the things that's made me one of the better high school coaches around is a pretty serious approach to fitness. Mm-hmm. And I was mostly inspired by that when I saw tennis on a list of worst trained athletes, and tennis players were behind softball players, but they were ahead of bowlers.
I think it's also how you got to look at that study and what they were specifically looking at. I think when it comes to fitness, I think tennis players are actually some of the healthiest and, most fit athletes that we have, especially if you look at sports specialization. I'm not a big fan of it, but if my kid's going to go into a sport where they got to specialize in one, at least in tennis, you're working both sides. You're moving forward, you're moving back. You've got consistency, you've got agility. So,
right. I'm sorry. Let me get in there. Let me clarify, because I do believe that the stat was all tennis players combined. I wasn't talking about good tennis players necessarily. So yeah, I mean, once someone becomes, more or less an advanced tennis player, then they got to have a certain baseline of fitness. But even so, I mean, I remember reading in the Complete Guide of Conditioning for the USTA that among, nationally ranked and young professional tennis players, they were finding some problems with mobility and stability that were actually fairly debilitating. So thanks for letting me cut in there. But I mean, I think, so can you, because I think we want to not only address helping our recreational players play longer and healthier, but then also create more upside for people who will be able to run faster, jump higher, bend lower, all that good stuff.
Yeah, well, I think it comes down to this isn't for, the screen's definitely for all tennis players from cradle to grave. And so a lot of people ask me, well, so I'm a high performance coach, so that's why I want to come take this. And then I get a lot of pros that are like, well, I only take care of 2-5, 3-0, 3-5 women or men. Why do I need this? And I would say that you need this more than ever before, because now you're coaching people that are coming to you with a pathological body. They can't move. Their patterns are off. And if you as a tennis pro aren't looking at that, and you're not working with a medical or fitness person, you're going to miss some things. And I get a lot of tennis pros that come through the course and they're like, holy cow, I've never understood how to look at this, but now that I can, I've actually got a higher retention. My athletes are having more fun because they can actually move to the parts of the court. They're not quitting tennis and going to another sport. And more importantly, it shows that you care about them as a tennis player versus just saying, hey, I have one system of how I'm going to teach you the forehand, or one system how I'm going to teach you the serve. And, if you've got to do it this way. And then all of a sudden they get frustrated because 1, they maybe can't. 2, you get frustrated because you're coaching them through something that they can't do. And then all of a sudden you get this little bit of turmoil. So to go back onto your question, I think it's anytime that you look at fitness, you look at medical, or you look at coaching, you've got to make sure you've got all 3 of those people talking, because you could have one person that's, going against what the coach wants done. You could have the medical person saying, hey, you know what, this isn't going this, and they don't even understand tennis. So I think with any sport, you're going to have people that are definitely not fit. You're going to have people that are fit, people that are extreme athletes. They're phenomenal. And just following them. So, you as a high school coach, you're probably seeing, especially now with the amount of years that you've told me that you coach and reading through your book right now, you definitely can see the difference in kids' movement now than where it was 10 years ago. You can see a difference in kids' attention spans. You can see a difference in their moving patterns, the injury rates. It's definitely rampant across the country right now.
Well, the thing that strikes me is how less competent 6- and 7-year-olds are now as opposed to when I first got started. I mean, it seemed like when I was getting started as a coach, 6 and 7-year-olds had better motor coordination and better strength to get some things done. So, I have to find myself working from further back to establish fundamentals and whatnot. So, I mean, I'm lucky because out my way, I have Don Chu, who's who's a legend in sports fitness and evaluating these things. So, I don't think I'm necessarily going to take a course because I always know that I have Don to refer to, and he and I get along great. We talk. So, I mean, I think it sounds like one way to approach this is
let me cut you off there real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
It's interesting that we go into that. You're like, I don't think I'm going to take the course.
Yeah.
So Bill Patton, who's a top high school coach, who always talks about, hey, you know what, we need to improve. And then he's the one that says, I don't think I'm going to take the course because I have a guy that does this.
Right.
That's where we have to get into let's go over philosophy real quick.
Okay.
So there's not one way to swing a racket, right?
Right.
An infinite number of ways to do that. And it's based upon what you can physically do as an athlete to make it the most efficient. Number 2, the philosophy of the human body. So if I was to sit here and say, okay, as a coach, how are you looking at your athlete when you think there's something physically wrong? What are you doing? Let me ask that to you.
What am I?
You have an athlete on court with you, and you're trying to teach them something, and it's maybe a physical problem. How are you going to assess it?
How am I going to assess it?
Yep. And then how are you going to know whether it's the right time to refer to Chu or some other person that's up in Irvine?
Right. So, okay. And so, and good. So that was a really good stumper. All right.
I'm just curious.
All right. No, and this is good because I'm partly asking that question in a way that, I know some of the people watching this are going to appreciate.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Because they're thinking the same way. They're thinking the same way. I mean, one thing I pride myself on is not pretending to be something that I'm not, or pretending to make a commitment I'm not going to make. Yeah. So now, some coaches have, I think, a greater justification to be even more educated in this area, and some do not. I mean, some people, just because of their budget, maybe can't afford it, and they have a professional that they know that they can refer to if their client's in pain, and then we can have that medical professional do the evaluation. So my answer is, I try not to get into it. I mean, I know a little bit about, if the pain is here, then here are some things we can look at. Here's some prehab that you can do.
So we haven't even mentioned pain yet. All we've talked about is performance. So you're jumping over saying, okay, my athlete's in pain.
Right.
Well,
okay. I'll give you an example. I'm teaching my player, how to have, inner rotation of the upper arm. Right.
How do you test that?
Huh?
How do you test that right now?
I don't test it. I don't test it, but I know that I have players who just don't have enough flexibility for that to happen. So, and then what we do is we kind of work it. I mean, they have to some extent put that to use. How are they going to gain that the functional ability to have the flexibility unless they test it some? So anyway, I think
no, absolutely. I think this is really important though, because you're the one that always told me, hey, I'm gonna come at this from a skeptic. So
yeah,
I think it's a really good concept, because now you're saying that you're teaching a certain way to serve.
Right.
You're saying we're going to push through this and we're going to continue to try to go through. It's like hitting the emergency brake. So every time you try to push this person into their block, they're continuing to hit that, right? So the body's going to have to, one, adapt to how you're actually coaching, right? So they're going to move into certain positions and they're probably not going to be where you want them. Or two, there's going to possibly become an injury point. So that's where, if you, as a coach, within 5 minutes of doing a screen, like with RacquetFit, you could be like, hey, you know what? Put your racket down. Let me just go through some things and see if you can physically do this. If you can't, then I got to justify. And it's just harder as a coach. This makes it harder as a coach. I'm not going to lie, because the screen's easy, But that's just bad coaching. If you know that somebody can't do something and you're continuing to try to get them to do it, that's just bad coaching.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if it is because, right. Okay. So because I know the specific thing that and the specific people I'm working with, and I'm throwing it at you as more or less a hypothetical. So I think if you observed what I was doing,
How many coaches out there, especially from your perspective, so I know you love controversy. So how many coaches of yours?
Wait a second.
No.
I don't love controversy, but I'm willing to get into it.
I love debate. That's what you said to me. And so one thing that I really think is unique here, and this is what I love about you, because you're always pushing the edge. You're always saying, hey, is this right for the sport? Is this going to grow the sport? Is this going to help tennis? Am I right?
Yes.
So going back to that.
You got me on my heels now.
If we look at this situation and we say, okay, as a coach, I have my favorite person that I like my serve. Say it's Federer, Nadal, or Djokovic. And that's the way that I teach the serve. Well, majority of your athletes aren't going to be able to do that. So if you do mirror coaching and you put Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson next to each other and you get them up to their top swing in golf, their arms are going to be in different positions. As me asking you as a coach, like, okay, which one do you like better? Well, someone might say I like Tiger. Someone might say I like Phil's. Well, what we would say is, I like both of those. Both of them are number one in the world. Hold on a second. Both of them are making millions of dollars. And more importantly, they're the best in the world. But they're golfing or they're playing tennis when we look at other athletes to their body's efficiency. That's the key point here.
Okay. So, all right. No, this is good. I'm enjoying this. Now, but we have some different things to balance. Okay, one, your point of sort of cookie cutter coaching, I don't believe in that because you know, people are so uniquely gifted and uniquely wired from each other that I mean, you know, there are 4 distinct styles of two-handed backhand and probably 2 distinct styles of one-handed backhand. And different people are suited to different ones based on their laterality. But, you know, that I don't want to go, I'm going to stop there. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. Right. But so that's one issue though, is that the uniqueness of the athlete. Right. And then you have the limiting factors of their fitness, flexibility, stability, mobility, immobility, instability, those things, right? So some clients aren't going to go with us down that path of seeking fully maximize their athleticism. So I mean, we can do what we can, but we also have to realize, all right, here's how much of that motion she can actually do without hurting herself.
Yep.
Right. One thing I also kind of pose to some of my players is, well, I could teach you an advanced serve, and then that means that years down the line, the upside of your game is higher, or I can teach you the easiest possible way, but if you want to become advanced later, you'll wish you'd chosen differently now.
Yeah.
Because it will sort of lock you into, you know, a difficulty. You'll have to change your grip later, which is really tough after you've hit, you know, 100,000 serves. So I leave that choice to them.
But I think that comes back to what I said earlier. That's a good coach who meets their athletes where they are, who isn't in that one type of system. That's a specialty. That's why tennis professionals are tennis professionals, right? It's the ability to read and be tactical and technical of saying, hey, let's do this with you, or let's do that. But it's the ones that continue, and like a lot of the people that, you know, we work with and that I'm working with right now, they're like, wow, so I've been missing all of these little things for this many years. How many players could we have gotten here? How many players have, you know, wouldn't have left? How many, you know, injuries would? And then not only that, let's turn it back on the actual tennis pro themselves, right? Like one of the things that we talked about after Irvine is how many tennis pros are hurt right now. Teaching professionals, you know, on the court, you know, with shoulder issues, hip replacements, you know, elbow issues, wrist issues. And so it's changing this mindset. And this happened in golf back in 2003 up until now, but it's changing that mindset that, hey, we've got to take care of our bodies as well. And that's been the hardest thing for me to see on the road, especially like with as many pros that I get in contact with, is seeing how many of them don't have the mobility, the stability, the strength. And so therefore they're injured or they're off court or they're getting surgeries. I just got an email today from a pro asking me to look at their MRI. Like, what should I do? I'm a teaching pro. And I said, well, let's look at how your body's moving. That's number one. And then from there, we'll look at the report and then we'll make a decision. But I think this goes back to the original idea of, what is RacquetFit for the tennis pro that, might be like, hey, I don't need that. I'm good. I'm fine.
Right.
And I'll talk about the budget because you brought that up too, is if you could add one tool to your toolbox as a teaching pro, where now within 5 minutes, you can legitimately see if your athlete can or cannot move or can or cannot do what you need them to do. About 85 to 90% of the people, when you give them a choice, once you show them that and say, hey, we got a system, do you want to correct this and actually fix the body and play better tennis? Or do you just want me to coach around it? 85 to 90% of the people say, no, let's actually fix this.
Right.
So it's bringing value back into tennis. And, one thing that you and I've also talked about is value. Like, a lot of pros aren't charging for their value. And so I think this is an opportunity. You become a specialist in like being able to read the body. 2, now this opens up opportunities for you to collaborate and get off an island where you're maybe just by yourself, but now you're getting to know fitness professionals all throughout your area. You're getting to know different medical professionals. So now these medical and fitness people, especially when they start to understand different athletes, they're like, hey, Bill actually pays attention to this. And I know that you're coming off an injury, or I know that you actually want to perform. I'm going to send you over to Bill because I at least know he's looking at this while he's training.
Right. Right. So, okay, let's assume for a second that the part-time pro who's coaching less than 10 or 15 hours a week may or may not be able to justify the expense, right?
Yeah. Well, I think with anything, expenses is anything.
Okay.
I have people who teach 1 hour a week or maybe have a kid that they take the course and they're like, hey, this isn't, but the money it's going to save us on being able to like start to look at things. So price to me is, I understand people will say price.
Right.
As a USPTA pro, you get a discount on RacquetFit, but beyond that, the return on it's so much more. And so, go ahead.
But who are your ideal clients? I mean, and you can, the only rule is you don't get to say everybody.
No, I get it.
So I think any large club with who has multiple tennis pros probably owes it to their club to get this and have their pros certified in this.
Yeah. Well, I think if you look at our clientele, it's teaching professionals, it's medical professionals, and it's fitness professionals or strength conditioning. And that's how it's always been. So usually we get a third, and third. Within that, we've had everything from high school coaches and parents all the way up to ATP and WTA, pro teaching coaches right now. WTA and ATP players coming in and actually taking the course because they want to actually learn more about their body.
Right.
So, it's one of those things that I always say, if you want to see improvement or you want to go the next step, there's always opportunities. And you can make value for anything you want to do. And like you said, the majority of the big clubs are sending at least one person so they have that ability to say, look, this is going to be our expert. So Bill, you're at my club. You're going to RacquetFit. You're going to become the expert. And we're going to refer all of our clients over to get screened. And then what's cool about big clubs too is now you've got the fitness person. A lot of them do have medical on site. They might have a massage therapist, a PT, or a chiro. But when you get out of that, there's a lot of clubs that don't have it. But that's also a cool business opportunity for these pros that are like, well, I'm just out of my local, tennis court teaching lessons, 20 hours a week. Well, now what if that gives you an opportunity that 12 people in the area that are now fitness or medically certified that you can reach out to? That becomes a feeder for you as well, business-wise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, okay. And what's the future of RacquetFit?
I mean, right now, I think, we've got our serve course that we've launched. It's been out for 2 years. We're launching ground strokes in the fall. We're going international in the fall.
Okay, let's back up. Let's dig a little deeper into the serve course. So can you explain that a little bit?
So we have our 14 characteristics, or what some people call a flaw or something they don't want to see. And so, but the only things that we teach have to have a physical component of whether or not it's affecting the person's serve. And so we break down the serve and we go over these 14 characteristics in our course. And we say, look, let's say no coil, for instance. If you got an athlete that can't separate their upper and lower body within that, turn, that's going to decrease power. It's going to put more pressure on the upper part of the body. You're not going to use the lower. So it's one of our characteristics. And so we teach them how to do video and then how to do the screen and then correlate the two. If there's a physical correlation, that's where we teach corrective exercises. And then we say, look, if there's pain, you've got to go to a medical provider. So that's our serve course. So we break it.
So let's just go one step deeper on that. All right. So what happens when you discover that the person has more or less a deep abiding chronic issue that won't be solved easily, that is affecting their
chronic issue? Is that a medical issue? Is that a mental issue? Is that a performance issue?
Medical. Okay. I had the distinct pleasure of being nearly broken in half by a future NFL safety when I was in my teens. Yep. And playing pickup football. And so I've got this really interesting injury to my core. And it's a bit of a limiting factor, but in all the years that and I often get it worked on in lots of different ways, through chiropractic and through different, through some massage and other, pressure point therapies and whatnot. So I've tried just about every modality you could possibly imagine to keep that thing somewhat mobile. But as I'm getting older, it's not getting better. Mm-hmm. So that would be an example. So when you have something that it's just a known thing and it's not really fixable, then what?
Well, I think it comes down to, you can get a lot of therapy, but if you're missing the mark, or say someone's not looking at the right thing, things aren't going to get better. There are going to be things that, unfortunately, there's limitations to matter in the human body that when you break them, they're broke. And now you've got to adapt around that.
Right.
This isn't the tennis pros deal, but there's a lot of tennis pros that are probably missing those things in their athletes. And so by doing this, now they can be like, look, this is a medical issue. We've got to refer over. We've got to now create that conversation around, hey, you've got a chronic situation. It may be an old fracture. It may be whatever you want to call it. But now at least you're communicating that.
Yeah.
That's really, really important.
Well, and that's tremendous. No, that's really awesome, because then, if you think about it from the client standpoint, people like to be understood.
Yeah.
And it gives the coach an opportunity to have some empathy and look at it from their client's point of view. Because I think the tendency is for the majority of tennis coaches not really to understand the limiting factors in their athletes and push them beyond what's healthy for them. And as a younger pro, I was guilty of that a lot. So, being able to find that point and then go, hey, look, you're not able to do something that I'm asking you to do. So, you need to get this checked out. But now, so how can someone, let's say you've trained, you said you have health providers who are RacquetFit certified. Is there a way for people to find if they have a RacquetFit certified health provider near them?
Yes, they can do find an expert and they can put in their zip code.
Okay. So even, and maybe, is it something, it sounds like something to encourage that if somebody already has an existing relationship with healthcare professionals, that they recommend the certification, especially if they call themselves a sports doctor, right?
Yeah, I think that's one thing that we've really been pushing with the tennis professionals, because they have that reach. And so right now, I get calls every day from players all around the country that are saying, hey, do you have a RacquetFit certified person near me? I'm like, right now we don't. We just launched last year. We're growing, but within the TPI model, I can be like, usually I can find somebody within 5 minutes. Same within our FMS and SFMA world. So if you've got a tennis pro that's working with a fitness professional or a medical professional, you guys can really become the experts in your area and create a really cool niche. So absolutely. I think we're getting your people to take that course would be a really, really important aspect to your team.
How many tennis pros, if you had to just pull a number out of the air, give me a ballpark, how many tennis pros around the country are RacquetFit certified?
I would say probably 55 at this point, 60.
Okay. All right. So you would have a chance to be on the ground floor of that pretty much in your area.
Yes.
And
And the ones that are taking advantage of it, it's really cool to see. You got John Davis in Arizona. He was in a club, and then he went into his interview, and they basically said, "Well, what makes you different from the other pros?" And he said, "Well, I'm RacquetFit certified." And what was interesting is that we've actually got a full TPI system at this certain club in Scottsdale. And they go, "Wait a minute, what's that?" And he goes, "You know TPI?" And they're like, "Yeah." And they're like, he's like, "Well, that's now for tennis what TPI was for golf." And they're like, "You're hired. We want you to implement it immediately." And so he came in, he started working with the fitness professionals and their medical on site. He's sending both of his other pros because now people are asking for it. They're like, "Well, why did Jenny get looked at and broke out? And now all of a sudden she's, working out, she's kicking my butt on Wednesday night league." So it's been cool to see that as well.
Yeah. No, like I said at the beginning, I mean, fitness for me has always been like the number one thing as a high school coach, because in 10 weeks time, you can't really change their strokes a lot. I mean, you can probably teach them one new tactic, but
Yeah.
if they can run longer, faster, bend better, move, and get to more balls, and the other thing that we like to say is, if you can't get there, you can't hit it.
It's true.
So no, and I can relate to that too. I mean, when I also then took greater care of my own fitness and was able to get more balls, yeah, it was a lot more fun to play.
Yeah.
Once you get to a level where everybody's a better athlete, then it feels more accomplished. That's for sure. So what else should we cover before we conclude this thing?
It's been fun. It's cool always seeing your point of view, and you and I are getting more and more time to talk. So I find it very interesting. And I think the big thing is seeing
Likewise.
I mean it. Like it's fun because you do like the one thing that you're able to do compared to a lot of people that I talk with in the tennis world and other sports is that you do like to dig that one step deeper. You like to say, okay, how can we, like I said before, how can we grow tennis? And that's what I see you doing more and more and more than a lot of people that I travel with. And watching you on court the other day really made me excited because you brought out your playbook of kind of like what you wanted to attack, and you were filming your content. But each thing was different and each thing was energetic. And I like the way that you approached, especially when like you were working with the youth versus some of the other coaches and some of the players. It was just fun to watch on your court.
Sean wants his own show. I don't usually let people interview me, Sean.
Well,
unless I'm a guest on their show. So this is like one of the rules.
I just think it's important that people understand your side of it and why you get people on your show to ask these questions. I think a lot of times they don't see that side of you as well. They may see like you're posting stuff or you're out, but you're actually out there in the field and you're in the grind. So that's awesome. So I think the biggest thing that we can do in the future is just continue collaborating. I do think you should get to a course. You and I talked about that. I think that you, especially within your fitness side of what you do and working with young athletes, now the most deconditioned athletes we've ever worked with, I think that you get a lot out of it. And then from there, just making sure that we continue spreading the right message for tennis and getting more people involved. I think if we could get more people with more touches on the ball, in a fun environment, in a social environment, that we would see tennis grow in the next 5 and 10 years.
Right. Well, and another thing, and I think this brings us closer to a wrap, is that the number one thing, and I got this from a book called The Sweet Spot in Time by John Jerome, one of the great sports philosophy books ever. If you haven't ever seen that, check it out because it's really amazing. He says the number one thing that keeps people from improving is injury.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. So you want to do a really quick, 1, 2, 3 take homes, and then give us your contact information so people can reach out and get more information?
Yeah, I think number one, you as an athlete, if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're listening to this on podcast, there's a specific efficient way for you to swing your racket, whether it's a serve, ground strokes, volley, any other type of stroke you're going to hit. It's based upon what your body can do. And so If you've been playing tennis and you're frustrated or you feel like you're not performing, there's one efficient way for you to do that. We just got to figure out what that is. 2, your body's made up of alternating joints, so stable and mobile joints. And so stable joint would be like your knee joint. It likes to flex and extend. It doesn't really like to rotate or bend. Within the hip, it moves in multiple directions. So I think for those listening, you as pros, I think you need to look at that human body interaction. So if you look at your foot, it's stable. If you look at the ankle, it's a mobile area. If you look at the knee, it's a stable. If the hip, it's a mobile. The low back's a stable. You know, the thorax or the rib cage and the spine is basically a mobile area. If we go to the scapula, it's a stable. If we go to the shoulder, it should be mobile. The elbow should be stable. Wrist should be mobile. Hand, lower part of the neck, if we're looking at that, should be stable. Upper part should be mobile. And the reason that I bring that up is that you guys need to check and see if some of these are working. You can go to RacquetFit on our Instagram or our Facebook. We put a couple screens on. Try those out. That'll tell you if your mobility and stability pattern's off. And then from there, you know, understanding that creating a team around you, I think that's the big thing, is that you don't have to be on an island as a tennis coach. You don't have to be the expert on the human body. What this does is this gives you an opportunity to, one, learn how to read it just like you would on a car, because your athlete's a car, to be able to read that dial, that check engine light, and say, okay, something is off here. Let me catch it before it becomes injury. Let me catch it so we can improve performance, and let me catch it so they can, you know, have longevity within the sport and have fun. And then the fourth thing is that if you want to reach out to us, RacquetFit.com, RacquetFit.com. You go to RacquetFit on all of our social media, and you can reach out to me on my email, which I know that you'll give them. So, yeah.
All right. And that'll be in the show notes because this will be on YouTube. And then also probably I'm going to take this audio and put it different places. So look in the notes wherever you're seeing or hearing it. All right.
All right.
Thanks so much, Sean. Hopefully we'll see you again sooner next time. And thanks for coming on to collaborate for a bit.
Thanks, brother.
Take care.
Cheers.